Tell me about the event last night. I mean, you've been describing it to me a little bit at over at St. Michael's in Lincoln. Sounds pretty cool.
It was tremendous. Like I said, few coaches were there. Coach Foley was just kind of hanging out. And you had Satterfield was there and Coach Cooper. And Cooper killed it.
These guys know how to get the crowd going. They know how to work the room.
Cooper had some stories about like just recruiting, particularly the Jeremiah Charles recruiting story that he had about like going to a basketball game to watch the tight end commitment. And then all of a sudden this guy's coming through the line and he's doing 360s and tomahawks and, taking off from the free throw line. And of course I went and saw him play basketball too. And he could jump out of the gym. And, now he's doing like triple jump and track. He's running the 60, so he's super fast. And I tell you what, Cooper dropped the nugget last night that Charles is going to be in the mix to potentially play next year. Maybe even start. But I mean, that's really where stuff was at.
Because I was thinking about that, and I do want to ask you more about that last night. But like while we're on it, I was thinking about some guys that might have the chance to, whether they're freshmen or redshirt freshmen, play next year. And I think off the face, there should be a bunch of guys in that mix.
Yeah.
But also they have so much returning that it's hard to like find spaces. It'll be good, I think, for the sake of development to get those guys right in the right, like small roles at first. Yeah. And then you just kind of let them go rather than what it was last year, which ended up being like, here's the fire hose, like put your face in front of it.
Especially on defense, right? I mean, you lost a couple guys in the secondary, but I think that, if we sat down and look at the roster, I think we could kind of just like put tick mark, and just go, here's your 5, right? Yeah. And maybe here's a 6th or a 7th guy that could play. I think the linebacker position is really interesting. I mean, you've got a couple guys there that you have to replace. Just Stephon just kind of step in. He was there last night, Stephon Thompson from Syracuse. It's kind of interesting to see how that's going to work, but I mean, I think you can kind of look at like, Ty and Hutmacher and Lenhart and kind of go, well, there's your 3. You get yourself a Van Poppel.
We know what they are.
You get a Kai Wallen that kind of mixes in and an Uman Milan, potentially does his hand in the dirt a little bit too. So, I mean, I think the defensive side of the football is written a little bit more in pen than I think the offensive side is. And I think the offensive line is, got a spot or 2 up for grabs. And I think the wide receivers are you got to pencil in the 2 portal guys. I mean, I was just telling you about it offline. Banks and Nair were there last night. Nair, I was blown away.
That's one that, I mean,
he is huge.
We've heard all this stuff about Banks and they love him. And there's a lot of reasons why. I haven't heard much about Nair,
So second team ACC, I get it. Like that dude, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am not glossing over Banks at all. And because, I mean, the people that are listening are probably on Red Sea Scrolls. They're probably going, write it down. Munson said this or whatever. And we're going to go back and, and do this. But
let me check and see if there's a live thread going on.
I'm telling you, if I was a cornerback against either one of those 2 guys on the field, I would be terrified. They were really super big guys, and they're athletic looking. I really feel like the spring here is going to do them give them a big boost.
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't have anybody like that last year.
No, not at all. I mean, these are difference makers, and I think the guys that are in the room, Lloyd and Coleman and all the rest of them, I think that they're going to I hate to skip over Jaden. I think you and I have talked about it. If that dude's not hurt at the start of last season, I really think that he's having more of an impact as a wide receiver. So I'd really keep an eye on Jaden.
Yeah, so I think they're going to have some options there. Maybe not, guys that you can like you said, pencil in and say this is what they're going to be for production, just because they haven't done it in Nebraska uniform yet.
Right.
But they might have options there. Okay, we asked and by the way, guys, a couple people are texting in about and tweeting in about the stream. Oh, yeah. Josh, give them the details on that. We're off for a little bit. Right?
They're updating the computers on the stream.
Yeah. So give us some time.
Yeah, it should. We're told it should be quick.
Okay. So that's what's happening right now. Don't worry about it. But we get one from the text line on the 402 here. Question for Munson. Not sure if you've talked about Willis McGahee Jr. I think he's going to be a beast at Nebraska. What does Munson think? Sorry if it's a repeat question.
No repeat question there. I love McGahee. I think it's really going to be interesting to see him kind of fall into the jack position. And I think he's a natural pass rushing guy that is really, has that ability to kind of add another, another guy that can pin the ears back and go after. You get your Princewell there, you get your Kywall in there, and you pick up McGahee now that can kind of go in there and just rotate in. I think he's one of the guys that you just kind of mentioned from last year. I think he's the kind of guy that you say you're going to get your 4, and if we're bringing you along and we're up in your rep count and we can move you into a rotation, maybe you don't redshirt next year because you could be that kind of guy. I think he's a quiet, confident kind of guy. It's really interesting given, the fact that his dad was who he was, a first round draft pick of the Buffalo Bills.
People forget.
And I think that's a really interesting guy to keep an eye on this spring.
I wanted to, so now we have this in your here, like, let's kind of go through the 24 class.
Let's do it
a little bit, and not guy by guy, but let's pick some stuff out.
I got a picture of the class too.
I was gonna say, like, you need a list since you don't.
I got it. I took a picture last night, so go ahead.
Okay, that's good. So I don't know about specific guys, but like, who are you picking out? Who you feel like maybe didn't get enough run throughout this stretch here? Because we know about the Raiolas and the Nelsons and some of the highly recruited guys in the class, but like, who's down there that you're like, man, I think that guy's going to be a good player regardless of the ranking?
I think staying on the legacy vibe, I'm going to go Keelan Smith.
That was an interesting one for me too.
He's so productive last year, player of the year in Missouri. Here now, having a good spring so far, starting out in the wide receiver room too, which is interesting. So he's got a couple guys like Nayor and Banks to kind of go learn from and take some tips from here a little bit. And then it's kind of going to be like, does Satterfield come back and start fighting, with McGuire to kind of get him back in the room, at some point for tight end. But I think for now, I mean, where Keelan is at, I think he's really in a good spot. And I know people want to talk about Bricks, and I've heard, I can tell you that Bricks and Pyle were very impressive to me when I saw him down in San Antonio. I really liked, and although I think a lot of people would disagree from a couple of plays that they saw, I liked Preston Talamua a lot in the Polynesian Bowl. His frame, I mean, that's a guy that's, not even a year off of having ACL tear and surgery, and came back like in October. He's only been playing for like 3 months on a reconstructed knee, and he's playing the Polynesian Bowl against some of the best players in the country. I felt like that's a guy to really keep an eye on too, because he gets overlooked because he's not there. And let me see. I'm trying to go down through the list here a little bit more. Roger Gradney.
Yeah,
let's talk about Gradney.
Heard some Roger Gradney buzz. Let's do it.
So here's a Roger Gradney nugget for all of your listeners.
Listen up. He
is surprisingly having a wonderful spring and putting on size and muscle, and he is just going to be one of those guys that's going to just develop, because he didn't have that kind of support that Nebraska is able to give all their athletes between the training table and the great facilities and just basically the strength and conditioning side of it all together. I have heard some amazing things so far about Roger Gradney, what he's been able to do so far this spring.
Here's a guy who and I think he became a popular, like, ooh, I like this guy and nobody's talking about him. Ja'Cory Barney.
Oh,
I mean, but like, I was a hipster on him early.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think this guy's gonna be really good. And then all of a sudden, I think everybody thought that too. Not surprising. He deserves that.
The kid was absolutely hilarious, because sometimes his team stats would be updated at max preps and sometimes they weren't. And I had to call him up, and then he'd literally like type them back to me, like on text message once he had him, and he'd go, "That's trash for real." Like, and he would literally start just kind of like, but they didn't have a quarterback. He was playing quarterback sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And he just didn't have like a consistent person to distribute the football very well. So his stats really weren't where he wanted him to be last year. But from everything that I can gather from the words that he is telling me, I think McGuire is excited about having him in the room. You just skipped over one there. Bly Hill at the bottom.
So I was
also an interesting guy right there.
Okay, so that's what I mean. It's their first full class. Like, this is usually a pretty big class, and they got obviously the star power at the top, and it ended up being rated really good. And then the transfer class, you had to, just help out a few places, help out a few areas. Obviously, you talked about Banks and Nair already, and Stephon Thompson. We got another offensive lineman who, is probably going to be a player for you in Mazuka. And nobody's talking about Bly Hill. So I will let you talk about Bly Hill.
And that is one that was mentioned by name last night when we were kind of standing back there talking to like the people that were associated with the team. He's going to be a really interesting guy to watch. Like we were talking, we could probably circle 5 guys and go, here's probably your starters. But if you don't include him as a boundary guy, I think you're probably missing out a little bit. He is super physical, super athletic. He's got this great frame on him, right? And I think that he could kind of move very fluidly between, either boundary to safety, and kind of, field safety or whatever.
Well, they have like 100 defensive backs. So
Cooper talked about that. That was really an interesting question and an interesting insight about like, hey, you guys got 10 defensive back commitments. He's like, well, this is a different defense, right? You're 5 guys back there all the time that are on the field that are in my room. So yeah, we're going to be shaped a little bit differently in our class from like a numbers perspective. So it's going to take some getting used to. I think you and I would sit there and go, we get it, but we really wished like another Carlon Jones or a couple more defensive linemen would have found their way. You skip over a couple of linebackers, but I think you and I would kind of say, and I picked on it because I'm a defensive lineman, I'm going to point it out as like, wished there was another defensive lineman in the class.
And clearly they were trying to get one.
Right. I don't feel like that was something that they were very happy with, but I think this could be something that they still feel comfortable with what they've got.
Well, and the thing is, and there's a lot of flexibility too, because you've given yourself the time with all of the young guys that you had producing on the defensive line last year,
right? And
that you don't feel like you need to supplement that right now.
Sure.
You have time to do that. You always want to add.
Yeah.
But you do have a little bit of time because of the way that those guys are just going to be entrenched at that spot.
Yeah, just after next year when you are going to roll out and you're going to not have Ty and you're not going to have Nash, you're really going to need to try to find a way to kind of groom whomever it is that you feel like you're going to take on those jobs the next year.
Yeah.
Machacek or whoever, right?
So, and then I was thinking about too, and looking through the class, and we talked about it earlier with the kind of scholarships and where they're at right now, who's going to play, just the kind of flexibility. Like it just feels like and this goes without saying because you're going into year 2, right? There's just so much more known right now, and then you can kind of build around that and softly, gently, put guys into roles.
Yeah,
it just feels like a really positive environment for development, which has always been the thing that they talk about all along. It feels like they're going to be able to do that. They're right on track with it.
I agree. And that was something that was also talked about last night about how guys were switching over from different sides of the football. I mentioned Machacek before. Jeremiah Charles did it, and it is kind of this thing like where they have like similar, abilities and traits to kind of go ahead and do that. And then there's kind of a need and then how things kind of then play out once they get to Lincoln. But to your point, I think they're beyond like kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall and figuring out like how this stuff is going to kind of work.
Yeah.
They have a much better idea about how that stuff's going to kind of, and then they're going to say like, we're a little thin, find a recruiting guy, don't have a recruiting guy. Well, is there something else we can do? Like somebody else that can move over. I don't think you're going to see a lot more wholesale changes in that area.
Well, I always ask you about 25 quarterback every week. So I think I'm just going to keep doing that. But there's also, Rule talked was it this week or was it last now? I guess it was last signing day.
Signing day.
Gosh, time I guess goes fast. I don't even know what week it is anymore. But he's talked about the room and how they were kind of all in on the 3 guys that they have right now. But he certainly didn't shut the door to potentially finding the right situation for a guy this summer. If he is maybe he's a developmental guy, maybe he's a 1 year back. I don't know exactly what they're looking for, but it does factor into the conversation for 25 quarterback.
Sure.
Which is, obviously starting to heat up now.
Well, I mean, they've offered 4 guys in the last, 4 or 5 weeks. I've got a story coming up on the guy that's the first one out of that group to set up an official visit in April, TJ Lateef. All of them, every single one of them has brought up the name Dylan Raiola to me. They are very well aware of what Nebraska got last year.
He's omnipresent.
Yes, exactly. He's in the conversation, and you just can't help but think a little bit that was in Mansky's mind, because things radically changed between he and Nebraska in December. Once that kind of all happened and played out, I mean, like it kind of did with Kalen, at least at first, then Kalen gets back in the class, which, by the way, heard last night, great friendly competitiveness between those guys, Raiola and Kalen. So I'm thinking that with Lateef scheduled to come in April, I think you can kind of go ahead and draw a little circle around his name and say, looks like the number 1 guy. But
in the post-Mansky era.
In the post-Mansky era of this recruiting board for quarterbacks, I think Lateef would be the number 1 guy. I think people are going to have to understand, too, that that's not going to be a one-and-done dude. He is going to take some official visits.
Well, and
he's visited nowhere so far. I mean, he's dependent upon these official visits to make trips.
And you can usually tell by who the first guy in is. And I think that's a pretty good indicator right there.
Absolutely.
Of how much they like him. Well, I mean, before you know it, we're going to, start thinking about, that stuff. Summer,
yeah.
What's it going to look like? We're headed down that road right now.
Well, I mean, and we're going to be talking about, as soon as we're turning the page into April and May, you and I are going to be talking about 2026 guys, and where is Nebraska kind of at with some of those guys? I mean, Jet over here at Millard South, he obviously belongs on Nebraska's radar. There's no doubt about that to me. So I think quarterback is another thing that remains a very important thing. Like you and I said, like there's a completely catastrophic scenario that could play out in that room. But then at the same time, if everything stays gelled and everybody stays happy, then you can just kind of continually kind of just add this guy and be in a maintenance mode and kind of keep going forward with, hopefully Dylan being the guy that you're hoping that he can be.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't go down too far down the road of the catastrophic situation, right. But you always got to think about it.
You have to be prepared for it. I think that Rule and his staff have been halfway prepared to address that stuff.
Right.
I don't think that anything's caught them too much by surprise.
No, it feels like when I hear him talk, he feels like not only he's in control, but and then he keeps on bringing it up too. He's like, look, what did I tell you that this, and this was going to happen, and this, and this happened, and it's good. And so now I was talking about this the other week. Like after that's happened so many times now, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit back and be like, all right, good. I guess I won't panic. It seems like you got this all under control.
I really feel like you could probably go ahead and take if Josh is feeling like he needs to get into some more of this editing stuff, you could take the Buddha doll and put Rule's head on it and just go ahead and call him the Ruda or whatever you want to say. Because
the Ruda.
Yeah, the Ruda. And that would probably work, because I think that there's kind of a Zen-like quality with him that he just does not get rattled about things. Number one, I think he's always got a way out. There's always an exit strategy. There's always a way that he can kind of go ahead and substitute things. And I think he's done a tremendous job, because he just has never put all the eggs in this one basket. I know the way Kalen played out with Raiola at first, but he had that exit to go back to Kalen right away. He's got it all kind of planned out.
Well, he's and then in his previous stops, I mean, we always like to draw connectors to those. He's never had a guy like that. I mean,
no,
this is the, I mean, even including in his time in Carolina, I guess with the exception of maybe Cam Newton, this will be the best quarterback he's ever been around.
I tell you what, some of the film still they played last night of Raiola was some stuff that I guess maybe I just hadn't seen before. Pretty amazing stuff. I think everybody should be really fired up to see what's happening with him.
Oh man. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different around here. I think that's for sure. and different in a good way, in that you'll have like competent quarterback play, which I think is would be advantageous to Nebraska football. Travis on the YouTube says he's got a guy. Here's a guy, a low key guy I think will develop into something after a couple of years, is Quinn Clark. He'll be a red zone beast with that.
Quinn Clark came up last night as well. Sean was quick to note about Quinn Clark and love his length, love his body control. He seems to have just this ability to kind of know like where the football is going to be at, and then he's got an amazing catch radius. And I just, there's not another guy like that in this class. He's really built differently with the length. He's got this long stride. He's really still, a really nice sprinter. He's got good speed as well. Yeah, I think that's another dude. And
it's like a whole bunch of hybrid guys.
But that's where I was going to go. The next thing was like, is he gonna play X, or does he slide down to Y at some point, because he gets to 235, and then all of a sudden you're going, you could still do this, but we really feel like if you get a linebacker or safety matchup versus a corner, oh my gosh, you could just go to work on that dude. Yeah. And I think that's really the thing that I see with Quinn Clark happen.
They have like at least a handful of those guys on that if they're working on right now.
He's got to be just drooling. Absolutely drooling with what the matchup problems that he can create between Fedoni and Nelson and Clark and Smith and all those guys, potentially a Lofton, the similar guy. Like Lofton's really a wide receiver right now. You have to really project him out to play, any type of hybrid.
Munson, anything else you want to hit before we get you out of here? Anything we missed?
No, I just really appreciate getting a chance to kind of meet with you. I saw you last summer in July, man, and it was good catching up with you then.
Checking some baseball out.
We were in baseball today. I would have been in Arlington today.
Right, yeah.
I would have been. I was there last year checking it out.
0-0 top of the second, by the way.
Yeah, so I would have liked to have gotten a chance to go back down there and do that, but I am here. I appreciate the snow, but I'm good with the snow with where it's ended. Just don't. I don't need to see anymore. I'm good.
You'll walk out now. This is what I was saying earlier. You walk outside, and I say, great, go ahead, snow all you want, because you're going to be gone in 48 hours. See you later. Snow's gone. Now, I don't know if it's gone forever. I'm not making any predictions about the snow, but I am saying this specific snow, it will not be in existence in 2 short days.
No, couple in-state tours, be on the lookout Sunday and Sunday. So we'll have capsule, and then ongoing content following the meeting with those teams.
HuskerOnline.com. The Tunnel Talk is up from today, which is always a feature that people are excited about. I always like when people start the message board topic on the weeks where you guys don't do the Tunnel Talk that says, "Where's my tunnel? Where's the Tunnel Talk?" That's my favorite one. I click on that every time.
I'm guilty as well. There are some characters on the site, and just know that everything I said today, with giving the voices or whatever, we love you. You are our people.
Munson, appreciate it, man. Thanks for stopping by. This was great.
Thank you for having me, man.